An inmate at the Santa Rosa County Sheriff's Office. This call will be recorded and monitored. Your advance pay account balance is $20.25. For customer assistance, early inquiries, or to log future calls, dial 1-877-650-4249. To hear the cost of this call, press 8 now. To accept this call, press 5 now. This call is subject to monitoring and recording. Do not use three-way or call waiting features during this call. Thank you for using Global Tel Link.
Hey, brother, one quick thought before you get started. I don't know if my radio interviews and my stuff are helping anybody out there, but I will tell you it helps me in here to be able to do them. You know, the Apostle Paul wrote all kinds of stuff from prison. So did Jeremiah. It really helps to feel like, hey, I can still do something for the Lord from here. So please tell anybody who's listening, if they want me to call, if they have a student who's being taught evolution in high school or college or something, and they want me to call, I can only call collect, but you can explain that to them. Tell them, set up an account and contact Laura Beth here in town. She kind of does volunteer secretarial stuff for me. And say, oh, tell Kent to call this number at such and such a time. I love it. I'd like to do 10 a day. Okay.
All right, brother.
Laura, L-A-U-R-B-E-T-H, Laura Beth 1611 at yahoo.com.
Yeah, I have her email.
Call her and say,
all right.
Just say, how do I set up an account and when can Kent call? I have 2 more to do this week is all, and I'd like about 20 more. So, and I prefer stuff on creation evolution. So.
Sure.
But anyway.
All right, brother.
So go ahead.
All right, so we're just gonna talk about your case a little bit, you know, and so the first question I'd like to ask you, brother, is, you know, on these structuring things, was there ever like a time, any withdrawal at all that you like purposely withdrew less than 10,000 for the purpose of evading the reporting requirements?
No. There were several times during that 3-year period where we took out over 10,000. That was for, you know, special occasions, staff bonuses, or I don't remember what, or some big project on the house. I mean, if a person takes out less than $10,000, that might be because that's all they have is to take out. You know, what if you take out $5? That's less than 10,000. Was that a crime?
Yeah.
It's like saying if the speed limit is 70 and you purposely drive 68, are you evading the speed limit law?
Yep.
No.
Yeah.
Hello. How dumb can we get here?
Right.
No. The pastor told us try to keep withdrawals under 10,000. Okay, we tried, and we did most of the time. It's not to evade anything.
Okay.
Avoiding. It's the bank that has to fill out the form, not me. I don't care if they can fill out. They probably do fill out a form for every dollar you take out. I don't know.
Right.
They can do whatever they want. It's the bank's requirement, not the person's.
All right, brother. So
there's nothing. There's no law against taking your own money out of your own bank to pay your own bills in any amount.
Right.
Now,
right.
if you're taking 2 withdrawals in one day to evade the structuring law, whatever that is, then yeah, they've considered that a crime. But there have been many cases where somebody would take, you know, 8 or 10 or 20 withdrawals out of their bank or deposits in less than 10,000 amounts, and they count all 20 of those as one charge of structuring. Why did they count all 45 of mine as individual charges?
Oh, right. That's another issue too. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're 12 days apart. How on earth can you figure withdrawals 12 days apart? Our structuring is so retarded. My attorney couldn't believe it happened, but I tell you, I found out right away the attorneys work for the court. That they're all a big bar brotherhood. So.
Yeah. Look, I'm not saying that it's right, brother, but here's my understanding of the law and the research that I've done. It's like when you go to the bank, right? And it's crazy how this works. I mean, it makes absolutely no sense at all. But this is my understanding, okay, of what they're telling me. You go to the bank. You want to withdraw, say, $12,000. That's your intent. You need $12,000, right? Now, if it's just one withdrawal, but you withdraw $9,500 instead of $12,000, you know, instead of $12,000, you withdraw $9,500 in order to avoid or whatever, in order to, you know, skirt around the bank reporting, filing the CTR. you are guilty of that crime, and it carries up to 5 years in prison or a big fine. If you know the law, right? Well, actually, you don't even have to know that it's illegal to do that. But if you know that they're going to file a CTR and you knowingly withdraw less than the required amount that you need in order to bring it under $10,000, that is what they would call structuring. That's my understanding of it.
Okay, you understand how stupid that sounds to
Oh
the
yeah.
average American.
Oh yeah, I know. I know.
How can they possibly know you need 12,000? And you're only plus the Congress needs to get on the ball and change that stupid law.
I agree.
This is a classic example of how Congress made a dumb mistake by passing that law to begin with. They should completely overturn all the structuring laws and let everybody out of prison that's ever been put in prison for structuring, including me, and they should refund all the money. Because not only can they say, oh, you took out $9,500 and you structured that transaction to avoid this reporting requirement, they can now seize that $9,500.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, I know. I know, brother. I don't agree with it at all, but just for the technicality of it all. So my question is, have you ever really done that though? Like, say, have you ever withdrawn less than 10,000 when you needed more? No. That's your answer, right?
Every 12 weeks, my wife would go get money to replenish the money in the safe. We had a lot of projects going on. We bought up part of the older neighborhood, and all houses built in the 30s and 40s, pretty much needing a lot of work. And so we always send in college students here at the truck, go get, $1,000 worth of shingles or plywood. It was for years. I mean, and we stopped doing that in 2003 and started using credit cards. They come in 2006 and arrest me for that.
Yeah.
And then they want all that money that was withdrawn 3 years earlier. They want that forfeited to the government. That's what this case is about. It's always about the money.
Yeah. Okay, brother. So now,
if anybody's avoiding or evading the law, it's the government in this case. They're the ones trying to work around the law or use the law to their advantage. If they need $400,000, they should go get a job and earn it. They shouldn't steal it from somebody else who got a job and earned it.
Right. So, okay.
The thieves we've got is our government. Anyway.
So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to reference something that Ms. Heldenmeyer says in her closing arguments against you. Now, brother, look, you don't have to answer anything, okay? And I know that these things are a long time ago, and you may not remember specific details about things. And if you don't, don't worry about even recognizing this stuff. Okay, so.
Please go one sentence at a time.
All right.
One sentence at a time, so I have a chance to respond.
So, do you remember a Darlene Porter? Darlene Porter is.
Yes.
Yeah, she sold a piece of property to you, I guess.
Right. Yeah,
Okay.
She sold the property. Yep.
So here's Miss Hellmeyer's case regarding this, okay? She says this. She says the interesting part about her testimony, talking about Darlene Porter, was this. She negotiated for the final purchase price of $155,000, I believe, she says. Does that sound about right to you?
Yeah, I don't recall the price. Somewhere around
there.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Not really important. But she says this. What was interesting about her testimony is that she said, unsolicited by her, Ken Hovind came to her and gave her a down payment. Basically, a partial payment of the property, and that ultimately, that money, that $30,000 that she got ahead of time was not included in the closing document. Okay? Now, I don't see anything wrong with that, but whatever. She says this. That was taken off.
Hold on.
You gave her a down payment of $30,000.
Yeah, nothing about Darlene Porter or the property purchased over there was part of the case. I was not charged with any crimes in that. There was no crime charged, no crime tried. The jury didn't find anything about Darlene Porter and the purchase of that property. It's unrelated. The only thing was structuring the bank.
Oh, yeah.
Everything related to Darlene Porter.
Right.
It's a red herring. It was designed to throw the jury off. Darlene Porter was not part of the case. That property was not part of the case, and that transaction was not part of the case. It's unrelated.
Well, I think what she's
moot point.
Well, if you go on down, I'll just get to the more important part. because I think this is what she's pointed to, is in the $30,000, okay? And here's what she says about it. And she says, but more importantly than that, that $30,000 that was paid, it was paid. And this is how they did it, okay? It's in the way that you paid it, she's pointing it out, okay? You tell me if, you answer. She says, Joe Hovind wrote a check to the bank, not to Darlene Porter, which she could have, but she wrote a check to the bank for cash. And she says, I'm sorry, to AmSouth. Then she says she cashes that check and buys with it 4 cashier's checks. 4 cashier's checks, not 1 cashier's check for $30,000, but 4, right? 3 of them for $9,000, 1 of them for $3,000. Then she says, she asks the question, why did she do that? She says, what logical reason could she have for it? A, just handing, what logical reason could she have for A, just handing a $30,000 check to Darlene Porter, or B, if she prefers cashier's check, going to the bank and buying a $30,000 cashier's check? Because of the $10,000 rule that was in her head, because she knew, as did Mr. Hovind, that there was a rule regarding $10,000. And so what they did was they broke that $30,000 up so that there was not one single instrument that she was taking to Darlene Porter that exceeded $10,000.
Well, I guess you'd have to ask, I believe that was purchased when our ministry was part of Faith Baptist Fellowship, Pastor Mooneyhand. Does it have the date on that?
I don't, let me see.
Seems to me that was before the year 2000.
Yeah, I don't know. She doesn't say a date
that
in the transcript.
Well, here's several things to consider. When we bought the property from Darlene Porter, it involved a lot of external things also, like storage sheds and equipment and inventory and stuff like that. That was really not part of the real estate price. So if I said, I want to buy your real estate, your house, for $100,000, but you also have a tractor. I know there was some kind of big lawn equipment, if I recall, some kind of big riding mower or something.
Mm-hmm.
There was various other things that were not really part of the real estate. So the pastor had advised, well, keep those things separate. Otherwise, you pay tax on the real estate when it's really not real estate. You're not buying real estate. You're buying, things other than real estate. So, yeah.
This call is from the Santa Rosa County Sheriff's Office.
So one thing to consider is there were other items that were not part of the buying the property that were also included in the package deal.
Oh, okay. So what you're saying is when you were buying that property, it wasn't just, the whole price wasn't just for property.
Correct. Yeah. So I don't see anything wrong. Plus, like I said, this was not part of the case. The jury didn't find any of that. So Heldermeyer bringing that up at trial and then at closing, when I'm not charged with anything there, that was, I think, wrong to do. That's like, trying somebody for speeding and say, by the way, he's got a red car, and did you know red cars are often cited? It doesn't have to do with anything.
Yeah.
This is retarded. So I would say we'd have to retry all of that. But I know Pastor had said try to keep transactions under 10 withdrawals because you'd have to ask Pastor Mooneyhand all those reasons. And we tried, and we didn't always. I think the record shows clearly we did go over 10,000.
Oh yes, she said, Miss Heldmeyer said you did. Miss Heldmeyer said you did 4 times within a span of like years, and she said, well, this was just accidentally. Accidentally by meaning, they didn't realize that they were going to have a CTR filed on them, so it was just an accident. But if they were purposely aware of all that, they would have done things a different way, is what she was implying.
No, she doesn't know that. How can she possibly? First of all, like I said, we need to decide exactly who is Miss Heldermeyer and who does she represent. I just got a letter. I get a ton of mail here, but I just answered a letter today. I don't remember when I got it. I try to keep up. I get way behind. Somebody's got a website. I think it's the Free Kent website. The guy who,
You have 60 seconds remaining.
He wrote me a letter and said, do you believe you should obey the laws of the United States? I said, well, gee whiz, you got to decide which United States you're talking about first. 3 or 4 different times in the last 100 years or so, there have been corporations started, including 1989. a corporation called United States of America Incorporated. Is that the one started in 1789? No. So it's a whole lot more complicated than people think. Let me call back again. We'll get onto that one. Hang on one second.
Okay, brother. All right, so when he calls back, I guess I'm going to ask him. Let's just see what he says, yes or no. I mean, about the broken up cashier's checks. See, the thing that's hard about asking him these things is like, how is he supposed to remember everything, Okay.
Link, prepaid call from
Ken Hovind.
an inmate at the Santa Rosa County Sheriff's Office. This call will be recorded and monitored. Your advance pay account balance is... Your call was not accepted.
Oh, oops. Okay, I gotta wait. Well, let's see. Should call back in a second. I hope he calls back. So, I mean, yeah, that's the hard thing about it is like when you're asking him these questions and trying to get to these details about so long ago, you can't expect the man to have like photographic memory and stuff.
An inmate at the Santa Rosa County Sheriff's Office. This call will be recorded and monitored. Your advance pay account balance is...
And it wouldn't be fair to, expect that of him.
17 cents. For customer assistance, billing inquiries, or to block future calls, dial 1-877-650-4249. To hear the cost of this call, press 8 now. To accept this call, press 5 now. To decline this call, this call is subject to monitoring and recording. Do not use three-way or call waiting features during this call. Thank you for using Global Till Link.
Hey, welcome back, brother.
Yeah, I tell everybody you have to listen to the whole announcement every time.
Yeah.
That's fine.
I got a little impatient.
No problem. Yeah, I think one key question that people have to get answered first. Let me give you an illustration. Jesus often used parables to get points across, okay? So I'll tell you a little parable here. You are driving your car in Washington State. A Canadian police officer pulls up behind you and turns his lights on, and you pull over. Can I help you, sir? He says, you are speeding. I want you to get out of the car and take off all your clothes.
Yeah.
Well, hold on a minute. We got two problems. First of all, sir, don't you only have jurisdiction in Canada? And even if you had jurisdiction in Washington State to pull me over and stop me, you don't have jurisdiction to tell me to take off all my clothes, okay?
Right.
So does the U.S. government, like the U.S. attorney, are there any limits to their jurisdiction? The first question you have to settle, and there's no time limit on challenging jurisdiction. You can get arrested, sentenced, put in prison, and be done serving your sentence and come back and say, wait a minute, that was a Canadian police officer. He didn't have jurisdiction in Washington. And you can get the sentence overturned, okay? So the question of exactly what all belongs to the United States of America and which United States of America are we talking about is a legitimate question. Where is their jurisdiction?
Right.
I still don't know for sure who came after me. I know it said United States, but I'm finding now that's not a simple question. I would suggest you let Paul Hansen call in and do a program, or maybe Ernie Land. He's real good at that. Do you have his contact info?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. Ask Ernie those kind of questions. Where is the limit? See, our Constitution is written pretty clearly where the 10th Amendment says, okay, anything not spelled out in this document is left to
the states. Yes.
The federal government has no business being involved in about 90% of the stuff they're involved in.
I completely agree.
Happened, over the last few decades, they've had so much what they call case law, which just on its face, that whole concept is stupid. Just because some other judge decided something, now all the judges have to go along with him. This is exactly what the Pharisees did.
This call is from the Santa Rosa County Sheriff's Office.
They got to the point where they had 20 laws on how to wash your hands. You have to wash up to the elbows, twice. That's not. They would take a Bible verse, like the verse that says, "Don't cook a kid in its mother's milk." Okay?
Yeah.
Well, the Jews have gone nuts over that and say that means you can't have a cheeseburger because that cheese might have been made from milk that came from that same cow. Hello? They're way off base. So they've taken one statement from God and made 400 laws about it. And so our United States court system has taken the obvious laws that are written by Congress, and then they add to it 1,000 more case law ramifications of it.
Yes.
Well, what this really means is ABC, because, Judge Jones said ABC. We have gone nuts, okay? Congress has got to rein all this. It's really Congress's job. They should stop. They can stop it all in seconds. And I can tell them how to stop a lot of it, and I'd be glad to, and hope they ask me to come testify. So the question of exactly where is the United States jurisdiction? Do they have jurisdiction over a church at all? Do they have jurisdiction to decide what is a church? Do they have jurisdiction to decide how a church ministry can spend its money at all? I asked Peter Riley, who owns the Catholic Church? And it's the same kind of trust, a corporation soul, that we had.
Yes. Well, Mrs. Hellmeyer's contention was that, I mean, we'll get there in a second. But one thing I wanted to point out to you is where she says there wasn't a CTR that would have been triggered anyway, okay, by your wife breaking up those cashier's checks like that. But what she said it was to show this. She says now that would not have triggered a CTR anyway, right? Because it wasn't a cash transaction. It says she may or may not have known that, but what this shows you is an overall attitude, an overall knowledge and intent on the part of Joe Hovind and on the part of Kent Hovind too, that they were mindful of that $10,000 requirement in all of their transactions, and we'll see the hundreds of transactions that occurred after that, all of which were under $10,000. She says this shows you that...
Hold on. Yeah, we got to go back to the original question, though. This is this Canadian police officer saying, hey, this shows your mindset if you like to speed. Before we get into whether I like to speed or not, who are you? And what are you doing down here in Washington State?
Yeah.
That's the question. Who is Michelle Heldemeyer? What is her authority? Does she have a right to question anything my wife does? Anything.
Oh, yeah.
Does she have that right? Before we decide, what's in my wife's mind when she's doing this, I don't know. My wife had nothing to do with any of that. We were both following instructions of the pastor. And she should not have gone to prison at all, and neither should I, but certainly not my wife. She did nothing except obey what I told her to do, and I was obeying what the pastor told us to do. But it's not the government's job to even question those things. It's none of their business.
Okay.
Of their business.
So here's the common Here's the common understanding of like federal jurisdiction and all that. People believe that the taxes, right? The federal government has the right to collect income taxes and all that. And what they contend here is Miss Hellmeyer, the prosecutor, she contended that you were not a ministry at all, but rather that was just set up because you want to run a business, calling it a ministry or calling it a church to avoid the taxes on your business.
Right. Just let's take this one sentence at a time.
Okay.
Does Miss Heldemeyer make the decision of what is not a church? Does the government decide what is or is not a church? Why is the government involved in this at all? First of all, this whole income tax law, the way it's written, breeds questions like this. Like, it opens the way for corruption and for theft under color of law from the government to steal stuff. This is what they've done in communist countries for decades.
Yeah.
You know, the communist country says we get to decide who can be a pastor, and we get to decide what a church is.
Oh, yeah.
That's why the founding fathers were very careful over taxes, because they knew the power to tax is the power to destroy. They said, guys, in our federal laws, there's only two taxes. A direct tax is a tax on an activity. If you want to be a medical doctor, it's going to cost you $50 across the board. And direct taxes have to be the same in every state. A direct tax on an activity like being a ship captain or being a doctor, okay, or whatever. That's a direct tax, and it has to be uniform to all the states. Okay? And you can avoid that by simply not doing that activity. Now, an indirect tax, the Constitution, I don't know where it's at, but indirect tax is where the federal government says, okay, we need $2 billion. Washington, you have 10% of the population, 10% of this bill is yours. You guys figure out how to get it out of your people. But under the Constitution, the IRS, being able for someone who claims they represent the federal government to come into your house and take taxes out of your personal stuff, that's so wrong constitutionally. Just the basic premise is backwards. It's wrong.
Yeah.
There should be a direct tax where they can say, Florida, you owe us 12% of the budget, and Florida figures out how to get it. If they want to get it off fish tax or however they want to do it, but it's not the federal government's job to do anything with personal tax. Now, I'm not in that battle. I understand a little bit of it, and that's not why I did anything I did. Okay? But there are many people writing and blogging and doing stuff on that question of, who is this IRS anyway? A Delaware corporation, 1933, July 13th, incorporated in Delaware. And it's a Puerto Rican collection agency. Who are these people? And what authority do they have, and where does their authority stop?
Sure.
It's back to the Canadian police officer. Once you start doing what this officer says, you slow down and stop and start taking off your clothes because he said so, well, then you're the moron.
Yeah.
You should have questioned his jurisdiction.
Right.
Always question jurisdiction.
So here's where I play a little bit. Here's where I play a little bit of the devil's advocate here, okay, brother? So what they're saying is, well, listen, according to that argument, what if a dude's like running a liquor shop and he just calls it a church? Does that mean he doesn't have to pay taxes now? What would you say to that?
Well, there are people who've done that. There was a guy who, because the tax law is pretty clear, and I spell it out in my 2005 affidavit, that ordained ministers don't have to do certain things. And I was ordained 1974.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, look, according to your extremely convoluted law, like a bowl of spaghetti, your law says, as an ordained minister, you don't have to do this, and wages are not considered income, and all this. It's all spelled out in that affidavit. So there was some bartender that got all his people together and said, okay, you're all ordained, and they all dropped out of paying taxes. Sure, well, that's an absurd example, but it really is a classic case of showing that the basic premise of letting a government agency have anything to do with individuals in the state of Washington or Florida or anything else, that's the premise that's wrong. What are they doing involved in your... Why are they monitor every one of my phone calls. They read every one of my letters. They read every one of my... They have spent millions of dollars since 2000, whenever, on this case. And it's absolutely none of their business.
Well, that's right. None. Florida doesn't have a state tax, does it? Florida has no state taxes, right? Well, state income tax?
Well,
do they?
I don't know how that works either. State taxes are usually piggybacked on federal taxes. So they take whatever you owe federally and say, okay, now you owe X amount state. So if you don't owe any federal, then you don't owe any state. But that's not a battle I get into either.
Yeah, I don't think Florida has a state tax, though.
I don't know. But for instance, if you are 501c3, you don't have to pay sales tax.
Yeah.
Well, we were not 501c3, so we always paid sales tax.
Yeah. Makes sense.
I'm not avoiding it. When we went to the lumber company to buy $1,000 worth of plywood and shingles for the roof, we paid sales tax on that. Now, other churches don't. Are they avoiding something? Well, yeah, of course they are. They're not evading anything. They're obeying what the law says for their type of organization. So was I.
Okay, so now here's where it gets...
I don't think we need to give...
Here where it gets down to it.
Well, we don't need to give the government... hang on a second. I don't think we need to give the government the permission to decide what is and is not a church. But but this whole tax law opens the door for them to do that.
Oh, yeah.
If the federal government would get back in the cage, they should get back in their cage and only use the constitutional means of direct and indirect taxes. They can then say, Florida, you owe 12% of this bill because you have 12% of the population, and Florida can come around and decide what's a church and what's not a church. But the federal government has no business being involved in that.
Right, they cannot make any law respecting religion.
If a bartender wants, if the bartender wants to say I'm a church, well, that's a state issue. That's not a federal issue. Let the state, let whatever state they're in, hassle that, figure that out.
Sure, I agree completely.
It's not a federal issue.
I agree completely with you on that thing. Like, the government can't decide that this church that's saying it's a church is not a church or whatever. I mean, it just can't happen.
Well, what do you mean? They do. It does happen.
Well, I know it does happen, but it shouldn't happen. You know, it shouldn't happen.
Correct. That's a big difference.
Right.
That's where Congress has got to get in and change this. Congress has got to say stop. You know, people are calling their congressman about getting involved in my case, and the congressman says, "Oh, I can't get involved in a personal active case." Well, they're missing the point. They can get involved in the issues that underlie this case.
Right.
Like throw out these structuring laws, shut down the IRS, send them back to Puerto Rico. Just stop. We've gone insane. I love my country. I love the Constitution. I'm not a rebellious person. I'm not
This call is from the Santa Rosa County Sheriff's Office.
Neither was Jeremiah. He just was preaching the truth, and they threw him down in a pit, for heaven's sake. You know, what did he do? John the Baptist was just simply telling the truth. Hey, Herod, it's not lawful for you to marry your brother's wife. That was the truth.
Yeah.
But Herod killed him.
You have 60 seconds remaining.
Oh.
So truth does not always equal, success.
Right.
Many people are right and lose in court and go to jail or get executed or burned at the stake. And right doesn't really mean much in this situation.
Yeah, it's just funny how Miss Hellmeyer,
that's what matters.
Miss Hellmeyer just takes it all and just flips it around, and it's just like circular reasoning. You can't escape it. Like, she says, well, look, he's telling the truth about all these taxes and how, how the government has no right to determine what a church is and all that. See, he's a tax protester, people. You see how she does that?
Hang on. I got to call back. We're going to run out of time. Yeah,
all right.
Exactly who is Miss Heldemeyer and who did she represent? Those are key questions that people ought to stop and ask.
The federal government, yeah.
There's a Canadian cop down here in America. Yeah. Okay, I'll call right back.
All right, brother. So, I mean, the issue of jurisdiction, I mean, that is a very fundamental issue. I mean, does the federal government really have the right to determine, hey, these guys are legit and these guys are not? These guys are a business, these guys are a church. Does the federal government have that right? Do they have the right to tax businesses in a state,
An inmate at the Santa Rosa County Sheriff's Office. This call will be recorded and monitored. Your advance pay account balance is $12.10. For customer assistance, billing inquiries, or to block future calls, dial 1-877-650-4249. To hear the cost of this call, press 8 now. To accept this call, press 5 now. To decline this call is subject to monitoring and recording. Do not use three-way or call waiting features during this call. Thank you for using Global Tel Link.
All right. Well, brother, there's so many questions that need to be asked first before we get into specifics. Who is Ms. Heldemeyer? Where are her limits? What is the jurisdiction? What is a dollar is another whole question you got to ask. And exactly what do you mean by United States? Exactly what do we mean by that? And when you went to this courtroom, exactly where are we? Are we on board a ship out at sea and you're now under admiralty law of some kind? Why does this flag like this? They'll say, some cop pulls you over from Canada and says, look at my badge. I don't care about your badge. Where's your authority?
Right.
All right, look at this flag. Look at this black robe. I'm a judge. Okay. Every judge has a jurisdiction. A question I challenge it. Does a judge have a right to decide how property, who owns property in a county, or is that a county issue? Is that a federal issue? We have gone nuts in our country allowing stuff like this to go on, and we've got to rein it in. But what happens, it goes back to this crazy case law idea. well, Judge Jones said we have the right, therefore we do. No, you always go back and look at the law. That's why with this creation evolution stuff, well, Professor so-and-so says ABC. I don't care what Professor says. What's the scientific evidence? Show me. Let's use some common sense in this.
Okay, brother, so I'm just going to give you the common understanding of jurisdiction and federal jurisdiction right now. And you answer it, okay? So the common understanding is that the federal government has every right to collect income tax and demand that businesses in every single part of the U.S., whatever territory, whatever state, it's federal jurisdiction, they fall under federal jurisdiction, all the businesses that run in every state. And the federal government has the right, and the IRS, as a part of the executive branch, I believe, and part of the federal government, has the right to collect tax. And if you don't comply with that, then you are a criminal. Now you answer that, brother.
Okay. I don't know that that's true. That is certainly way off my radar as far as things I'm knowledgeable about. That would be one for Paul Hansen or Ernie Land. What has happened, though, over the years, the federal government has, I think, pulled off a trick where they've got shadow states.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for instance, there's a state of Florida and there's a Florida state. They have the same boundaries, but one is a federal jurisdiction, a federal enclave or something like that. There are 51 of them. That's how they included Washington, D.C. and got them to get senators now.
Yeah.
Why did Washington, D.C. have a senator? Hello, that's not a state. Well,
yeah,
it's a federal jurisdiction.
Mm.
And exactly who are these senators and congressmen? Are we in the land of Oz now, or is this down the rabbit hole? And are we in Wonderland, or maybe it's the Matrix? I don't know, but I sure smell a rat. Something is seriously wrong.
This call is from the Santa Rosa County Sheriff's Office.
I don't think we're in Kansas anymore. Something has happened, and I feel a little bit like Neo slowly waking up and seeing the Matrix. I think they pulled the wool over our eyes, and we think that they have jurisdiction over things that they don't. And that's something somebody else will have to answer, because I don't have an answer to that. I see a problem, I don't know the solution.
Okay, so here's one thing. Here's one thing that you are pretty sure on, right? Is that the federal government cannot determine that, hey, CSE and Dinosaur Adventureland, they're a business, so he owes taxes, right? They cannot determine that. The federal government cannot.
Well, they did and they do all the time, but I don't think that's correct. I don't think they should. And I think it's never too late to challenge jurisdiction.
Okay. So
and that can be done at any time and at several levels and in many ways. See, I may not win in this federal court. Nobody does. Less than 1% or something like that. A really tiny percent win in federal court. But I can win in public opinion.
Yeah.
Hitler won. I mean, he just plain won for like 9, 10, 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody knew he was wicked and wrong and evil.
Right.
So the fact that I lose in court doesn't really matter as long as the gospel keeps going out.
Well, amen, brother.
Philippians chapter 1. I want people to know I'm trying to obey the law. I did not deliberately break any laws, and I want the gospel to go out. So.
All right, brother. So look, here's another point. Here's another question I would ask, because this is brought up too all the time. Okay, so Ken Hovind, right? They said Ken Hovind chose these 3 people, right? But he's been told over and over by all kinds of experts that he needed to pay taxes. And every time that he was told that he was doing something wrong, Ken Hovind didn't just comply with the law, but rather he tried to find a way around the law. Tax protester, gimmicks and stuff like that, like the corporation soul or the trust fund. This shows us that, Ken Hovind doesn't care really about the law like he says. He doesn't care about paying taxes. He's just another tax protester trying to avoid paying taxes. Their allegation.
Let's take that small bite at a time. That's a whole lot of different topics in there.
Okay.
I love the law. I love the Constitution. I love my country. I love the Lord. I love the Bible. I love my family. Okay?
Yeah.
I'm not trying to hurt anybody. I'm trying to get our country back to its constitutional roots. Suppose the government has drifted away from the constitutional boundaries. Suppose a Canadian police officer pulls you over and says, take off your clothes, and you resist him and say, no, sir, I will not do that. You don't have that authority. Are you then anti-police?
See, that's a good question, brother. Yeah, exactly.
The policeman he's exceeded his authority. Of course, you should stand up and say no. If the federal government or someone pretending to represent the federal government has exceeded their authority, it would be a patriotic thing to do to stand up and say no. You don't have the right to tell the church what to do. I'm reading Fox's Book of Martyrs, and a lot of people were burned at the stake over this same issue 500 years ago. It's the government trying to encroach on telling a church what to do and what not to do and who can be a pastor. It's a separation of church and state issue.
Right.
So they are the bad guys that stepped way outside the boundary. It's like this Canadian cop telling you to take off your clothes and you saying no, and somebody saying, well, you're just a rebel and don't like to believe the police and obey the police. No, the police was the rebel. He's the one stepped outside the boundaries, and you are reining him in. I think the government stepped outside the boundaries. They don't have a jurisdiction to do a lot of things that they did in my case, including decide what the church and what the business. It's none of their business. Absolutely none of their business. Now, when the judge makes a ruling, I obey it. I have never willfully broken any of the judge's rulings, and that's what this new case is about. Did I willfully disobey? Absolutely not. And I would not. Now, do I agree with the ruling? No, it was wrong. It was really wrong, and it needs to be fixed. But there are lawful ways to fix it. Yeah, that's all I've ever done.
Here was the thinking on that. They were thinking, well, look, Kent Hovind, right? The judge's ruling was saying that, okay, he owes all this money to the IRS, so we're going to take all this land that belongs to him and not really to this invisible, made-up corporation soul, right? So we're going to use that to pay back the federal government. So now what they're saying is that Kent Hovind is still trying to defraud the federal government by putting in that list pendant. You know, that's just, I don't know. What do you have to say about that, brother?
Well, people can say what they want. See, in the judge's mind, it's a final order. They call it a final order. That's an interesting choice of words. It was a final order. Once the judge gives a final order, you have the option of appealing that. Of course, your chance of winning is close to zero, but you can appeal a final order.
Yes.
So if you don't win on appeal, then they say this is a final order. And okay, that's the way they think, and they're unwilling to go back and consider that maybe this whole order was wrong. Hitler had a final solution. He made a decision. It's finally decided we're going to kill all the Jews. Okay? After Hitler made his final solution decision in 1938, a whole lot of people resisted that decision and went over there and fought a big war, and a bunch of guys died fighting Hitler. Well, wait a minute. I thought that the dictator of that country had made a final decision, and everybody should obey his orders. Were the people in Germany that hid the Jews wrong for resisting Hitler's final decision? No, they were right.
Right.
I am not right. I think the decision to give the church ministry property to the government for a personal for structuring, for taking your own money out of your own bank, I think that's wrong on so many levels. Okay, but I understand that was the judge's final order. There was nothing I could do about it unless the case was still active. And with my Bivens lawsuit in South Carolina, part of the remedy I asked for was to reopen the 2255. It was perfectly legitimate and lawful for me to file a Liz Bendens.
Mm-hmm.
There was nothing wrong with what I did.
Right.
My son was standing by with money in hand, ready to buy the property. The government did not lose a dime.
Yeah. Okay, brother. So, okay, so going back to, the allegation that, oh yeah, these three people were handpicked. Okay, so this is just what they're trying to convey. These three people, the IRS enrolled agent, the CPA, and the attorney, that you got letters from saying that you were in compliance with the tax code and the tax law. They're saying that, well, look, what Kent did was he just handpicked these three. He searched far and wide trying to find anybody, just these three people who would tell him what he wanted to hear. Is that true, brother?
one bite at a time. Doesn't everybody on planet Earth do that with every decision they make? Don't you pick people when you're deciding to buy a house? Don't you pick people whose opinions you trust and who you think are on the right track? That's a silly argument on its face, okay? If a person is a CPA, someone has decided they have the credentials to be a CPA. How many people are ordained in America that believe vastly differently than I do? There are ordained Catholics and ordained Muslims and ordained, Baptists. That's a silly argument on its face. I want to find somebody who understands the law and who understands our Constitution. I think everybody with half a brain and one eye would say, look, America has drifted a long ways from its roots. And so if you find someone who loves the country and understands the Constitution and says, wow, here's where we ought to be, way over here, they may look a little right-wing to the average person because we've drifted so far to the left. But actually, they're the one that didn't move. They're back right where the Constitution says. So that's an awfully generic argument, hard to refute, because where would you start?
Okay, so like
I've never met any of those people.
Like one person said, well, look, Ken Hovind's mother-in-law, I guess? I don't know how they know this, but I guess they do. Your mother-in-law was a CPA of some sort or IRS expert? I don't know. Do you know about this?
Well, she did taxes for a lot of people. I don't think she was a CPA.
Okay.
She just was a tax preparer, and she had her own little business there in her house.
Yeah. And one person was like,
many years.
And one person was like, well, why did he just ask her? No, he had to go searching for all these people. He had to go find just one specific person that, would tell him what he wanted to hear for his, what did he call it? A cheek argument, or I don't know. Like, so that Ken Hovind could have the case of, the argument was, this was just for the purpose so Kent would just be able to say, oh, I didn't know,
Well, let's take this in smaller chunks here.
Yeah.
The IRS booklet 517 says you're supposed to ask an attorney, okay? My mother-in-law was not an attorney.
Right.
You're supposed to ask a CPA. She is not a CPA. You're supposed to ask an enrolled agent. She's not an enrolled agent. There are thousands of people who are IRS tax preparers. She wasn't any of those that their booklet 517 called for. Why would I ask her to comply with booklet 517? She wasn't. Why don't I ask the car dealer what he thinks,
Yeah.
You have 60 seconds remaining.
Okay, brother. Hey, real quick question, right? Real quick question. IRS agent. IRS enrolled agent. Did you only ask one?
Sure.
Okay. So he was the first one that you asked.
I think so. Yeah, that I don't recall.
Okay.
Probably, though.
Yeah. All right, brother. You're going to have to call me back.
One of them. Yeah, one of them. You want me to call back?
Well, it said you have 60 seconds left, I guess.
Okay. I can call back again. You're paying for it.
All right, brother.
All right, I'll call right back. Last time.
All right. So that's a good fundamental question to consider. What gives people the right to determine, or the federal government to determine, hey, is this guy in a church?
This is a global
Is he actually a minister?
Ken Hovind.
An inmate at the Santa Rosa County Sheriff's Office. This call will be recorded and monitored. Your advance pay account balance is $8.02. For customer assistance, billing inquiries, or to block future calls, dial 1-877-650-4249. To hear the cost of this call, press 8 now. To accept this call, press 5 now. To decline this call, hang up. This call is subject to monitoring and recording. Do not use three-way or call waiting features during this call. Thank you for using Global Pill Link.
Hey, brother, one quick thought before you go on to something else.
Sure.
Doesn't everybody vote for a politician who they think is going to vote the way they want him to vote?
Oh, right. Of course.
Is there any similarity to what we're just talking about there?
Maybe. But,
Okay.
the thinking would be like, okay, so like, here's the thing. The IRS pamphlet is telling me, okay, I got to talk to a CPA, right? So I call up one CPA. They give me the answer of, hey, you owe taxes. So I call up another CPA. Tell me the same thing. And I go through like 50 CPAs until I find that one. Finally find that one CPA telling me, hey, you're good to go. You know what I mean? And that would, what they're saying is that would show dishonesty on my part and insincerity in my belief that, hey, I'm really not doing anything wrong. You know?
I understand the argument, but let's look at this. Like I asked Peter Riley, I said, if I asked 10 CPAs to fill out my tax return, would they all get the identical answer? And it's an obvious no, they would not all. That just shows the problem with the law. It is too complicated. It's way too complex.
Yes.
Doesn't every, and part of Peter's answer was, well, some CPAs might know more about it and be able to find more deductions for you. Oh, hold on a minute. Let's focus on that just for a second.
Oh, you're avoiding taxes. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you saying there are lawful ways to cut your taxes down that one person might know that somebody else might not know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, some know more about it. Okay, well, good. So if one particular CPA happens to know, hey, churches don't have to do this at all. Oh, okay. Are you a church ministry? Yes. The government says no. Why would they say no? Suppose Congress passed a law that I can seize all the elephants in Washington State. I'm a game warden. Anybody got an elephant, I'm going to go seize it. Okay. So I come to your house and I say, that car sitting in your driveway is an elephant. I'm taking it. Can I classify it as an elephant just for the purpose of seizing it?
Right.
You see what I mean?
Yeah, I see what you mean, brother.
Giving people authority like that.
Oh yeah.
Why does the government have the right to decide what is and is not a church?
Hey, brother, I'm with you right there. It's like, executive orders being written. Just because people write stuff on a piece of paper doesn't make it right, and it doesn't have any legitimate authority unless the people allow it to be enforced. And I'm afraid that's what's happened today.
That's exactly what's happened. It's back to the Canadian cop telling you to take off your clothes. Okay, well, if you start taking them off, you're the fool.
Yeah.
You're not questioning him.
Yeah.
So everybody should obey the law. That's all I'm asking. I'm trying to. Has somebody showed me a specific law I broke? If they're saying I went CPA shopping, okay, I didn't. But suppose I did.
Mm-hmm.
What difference does that make? A CPA wrote a lengthy paper saying I'm doing everything fine. That's the facts. I obeyed the law.
Right.
This call is from the Santa Rosa County Sheriff's Office.
They'll say, we don't like that CPA. Okay, well, I'm sorry. A lot of people go to pastors for advice, and I don't like the advice the pastor gives them either. But hey, he's the pastor.
Yeah, I know. That doesn't make any sense to me either. It's like, what, you would expect me to go to a Catholic priest instead of like a brother that I know? A brother that I know believes the scripture like I do? And would you say that I'm trying to avoid what the scripture is telling me because I don't go to, the people that you say I should go to? That doesn't make any sense.
That's the whole argument. That's exactly it, brother. You hit it right on the head.
Yeah. So, one more thing, brother.
All of that is,
okay.
Hang on. All of that is a rabbit trail from the real issue.
Yeah.
I wasn't charged with any of that. There was nothing to do with my personal taxes in this case at all.
Yeah, it was
the
withholding
only thing in the
taxes.
Case was structuring.
Structuring.
CPA, IRS, and rules had nothing to do with any of the three charges.
Right.
Anyway, so that's a rabbit trail. But go ahead.
All right, brother. So one more thing that I'll address in what Miss Heldmeyer said, and she was talking about your Dinosaur Adventureland, okay? And she's saying, see, look, this is a theme park, and it was meant for profit. And here's what she says. And she says, you'll recall specifically as regards to Dinosaur Adventureland that this was a theme park of some sort that had specific prices to get in. She says these were not donations. These were not, you can come in and there's a little donation box on the side like some of the public museums. She says that's not what it was at all. You have to pay to get in.
Okay, wait, slow down now. Let's take this one at a time. Is this Michelle Heldenmeyer's job to determine what is and is not a church and what a church can or cannot do? If a church tells their youth group, we're having pizza Friday night, everybody bring $5. Is that against the law to require the kids to bring $5 to pay for pizza to come for pizza night? Do churches do that in your city?
Well, yeah.
Yes, they do.
Mm-hmm.
Does your public school tell the kids, hey, we're going on an outing to the zoo, it's going to cost $10, all you parents spend $10 with your kids? Of course they do. Is the public school property tax exempt? Should they lose their tax exemption because they charge $10 to go to the zoo? I mean, this opens up an entire can of worms that Michelle Heldenmeyer had no business opening. It's not her business what a ministry does, okay? Now, secondly, I would point out, if she or Scott Snyder or any of these Irish, if they don't like the way we're doing things, come talk to me. You don't need to arrest me and throw me in prison. Come write me a letter or answer my letters. For heaven's sake, just answer them and say, okay, Kent, we think you're doing this wrong. Oh, okay, please show me what law.
Okay, so the argument would be... So the argument...
Yeah. Criminal about this.
The argument would be, though, it would become her business, right? This is what she would say, I imagine. She would say and contend, well, if you are setting up a business to make money, then it becomes the business of the federal government because of the federal income tax, and withholding requirements.
Okay, that goes back to that goes back to our previous discussion. Is that correct? I would challenge every aspect of that. First of all, exactly where is the boundary of the federal government? Exactly who is this Michelle Heldenmeyer? Who does she represent? What are their limits? What's their jurisdiction? There's a whole lot of questions got to be answered before we decide, can you pay $7 to go to Dinosaur Adventureland? And
okay.
Many people came for free. People said, we can't afford, okay, come on in. I mean, it was not mandatory that anybody paid. But not only this thing, it's way off base to even address that topic. Who's this Canadian police officer down here telling me I'm speeding? What are we doing here?
Okay,
I don't
so
think the government has that right, but if Congress passes a law and says they do, okay, I'll obey the law. Show me what law.
Okay, all right. The law that a business would have to pay taxes to the federal government? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I don't understand all of those. Nobody does, okay? But I did exactly what everybody that I thought I trusted told me to do.
I believe you, brother.
If they thought I was doing something wrong, they should have called me and said, hey, we need to come talk about this. Oh, okay. And I would have called the pastor and said, Pastor, let's go talk. Or I would have called Glenn Stoll because he was the trustee.
Mm-hmm.
Whether people like him or not is not the issue.
Mm-hmm.
What does the law say?
Exactly, brother. And that's the craziest thing that I don't understand what these people, what they're thinking at all. It's like, look, I said that, look, this guy, Kent Hovind, look, the IRS never gave him any warning or anything. They never wanted to just sit down, talk to him, about why Kent Hovind exactly owes a tax. They just came and, took the dude to prison. They took the dude to jail,
Well, see, that's a Gestapo tactic. We don't know what to say to you. We can't win your argument, so we're going to come beat you up. That's like a professor in college saying, you believe in creation? Well, I'm not going to debate it with you. I'm just going to flunk you instead.
Yeah.
That's what they did. If they disagree, come talk to me. Write me a letter. Say, let's meet. I will obey every law. But they did not. They just simply came with a SWAT team, dragged my wife out of bed. 4 people. Can you imagine your wife, 5 foot tall, 50 years old, a grandma, sweetest lady you'd ever meet in the world, a piano teacher. She's sound asleep, and she wakes up, and there's 4 agents around her bed, make her get up, won't let her get dressed, won't let her go to the bathroom, won't let her put a robe on, and take her in her nightgown down to the courthouse to arraign her for taking money out of her own bank to pay her own bills.
Yeah.
Has America become Russia or Cuba or China? What is happening here? This is, Americans have got to wake up and see the bigger picture in this case. Forget focusing on the details of who's Michelle Heldemeyer and how much is $10,000. What on earth are look at the tactics they used.
Yeah.
Do you want your federal government to be able to come into your bedroom? Is that what our founders wanted?
Exactly.
If anything, it should have been. That's a classic example of why it's supposed to be a state issue and why the founders were scared stiff of giving the federal government power to tax individuals.
Yeah. Well, now, according to the
Exactly
testimony, Scott Schneider said he did visit you, I guess, at CSE, at Dinosaur Adventureland, once or twice. I don't know. I don't recall how many times. Did he visit you there?
He came out twice. And left papers, I believe, and I answered every time.
Yes.
I wrote back a lengthy response that, he has never answered one of my letters. Never one.
And
He has never answered a letter.
And that's the crazy thing.
Probably won't.
It's like,
yeah. He feels like he's above the law. He doesn't have to.
I know. People don't even.
He's the master. I'm not debating it.
People never recognize that fact, is that you actually answered this guy. You said you gave him an answer and a response, and he never got back to you. No. What does he do? Oh, he just waits until he gets a warrant or whatever, and without the proper document attached to it, and then goes and storms your house and takes you off to jail. I mean, what is this? That don't make any sense at all.
Well, see, in Pavlov's experiments, Pavlov would ring the bell and feed the dog, and ring the bell and feed the dog, and pretty soon the dog learns to associate. Oh, when you hear the bell, food's coming, start salivating.
Yeah.
But people don't understand that Pavlov then would ring the bell and feed the dog.
Right.
And he would purposely confuse it, where sometimes he'd ring the bell and feed the dog, and sometimes he'd ring the bell and feed the dog, and it made the dog terrorized when he heard that bell. And what every dictator wants to do is to terrorize his people to keep them in fear. I mean, we have a bunch of people going over now fighting against terrorists. Hello?
Yeah.
We better look inside our own borders for the terrorists. My wife is terrorized to this day. Wouldn't your wife be if she was 5 foot tall and 100 pounds and a piano teacher and somebody walks into her bedroom with guns on and drags her out and won't let her put a robe on or go to the bathroom? What has happened to our country?
Yeah, I know,
This is the kind of stuff that happens in communist countries. This shouldn't happen here. And somebody's got to stand up and say, would you quit focusing on these little picky details and start looking at the big picture? Who decides what a church is? Why is the federal government giving anybody authority to walk into anybody's bedroom?
Yeah.
Armed. And terrorize them. What is going on here? There's a much bigger picture we've got to look at. And I've said it many times, I love my country. I love the Constitution. I support it. Now, during the Revolution in 1700s, only 3% of the population supported George Washington and Patrick Henry. And there were a variety of people involved in it. John Hancock signed his name huge. He's the kind of guy, I'm going to be outspoken. Others were a little more behind the scenes, but they had a variety of a mismatch of people, even in our patriots. But now we put all their faces on our dollar bills, and we're proud of them. But back then, most people weren't proud of them. And they argued with each other all the time. Patrick Henry and George Washington and these guys, they disagreed on all kinds of stuff. So I am a patriot. I love my country. I love the Constitution. I love the law. We have to have law. We have to have taxes. I'm in favor of all of that. But I think we've got to have some common sense here and go back to what does our Constitution say? Who exactly is this U.S.?
You have 60 seconds remaining.
Where is their jurisdiction? That's all. I think people need to wake up and smell the roses and look around and say, have we gone crazy?
Yeah.
Anyway, brother, thank you so much for getting this out. Sorry this is a mismatch of information. I can have Paul Hansen call or ask him to, or Ernie Land. Why don't you interview them? Ask them the questions about federal jurisdiction. I'd love to get that out there.
Yeah. Maybe I'll.
Want me to do that?
Yeah, maybe I'll interview Ernie Land.
Okay.
Yeah. That might be a good idea, because it's free to talk to him.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you so much, brother. Well, Paul can call one time. It costs you $3. So you want him to do that?
Yeah, sure.
Oh.
He can call me next weekend.
Sounds great.
That'd be fine.
Rent it around.
All right, brother.
All right.
God bless.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
All right, so that was Kent, and I will go ahead and review this video. And if anybody, even the the naysayers out there, if you listen to this video and you have any further questioning that you want to do, go ahead. I mean, really, I don't mind. I don't think Kent minds either. He is ready to answer for himself. Now, whatever you think about his answers, it's up to you. But the thing is that I want people to understand that, look, Kent is a sincere guy, okay? He's a sincere guy. He believes what he believes is right. And he's not going against his conscience, is what I'm telling you. Now, does that matter? Does that matter? Well, look, in tax law, yes, it very much does matter, okay? In tax law, it does matter. You can't just throw people into jail because the Congress knew. Look, Congress knows that the tax law is so crazy and people make mistakes according to the tax law all the time. All right? It happens. But does that mean a person needs to be thrown in prison just because, okay, they made a mistake? No. So and that's what his attorney's defense was. Look, just because you do something wrong doesn't make it a crime. Doesn't mean you're a criminal. You're just mistaken. All right? But Kent's just wondering, like, what law exactly did I break? And how? And why? But anyway, maybe next weekend I'll have some more questions for him. Or if anybody else has some questions for him, that you'd like me to ask, go and let me know. Alright? Take care.